go live. Is this working? Yeah, it seems like it's fine. That's pretty good.
Uh,
Do
I'm
you?
still waiting for you to stream on YouTube. I can't see it.
It should be
Uh,
streaming about
yes. Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
There's a.
Yeah. I think.
Okay, good. Let me just check if the audio on YouTube is correct. Is good. I know people tell me I have to be close to the mic. Oh. Oh yeah. That's that answered that. Okay. Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the role of women in Islam. I have Zara here with me. Hi Zara.
Hi. How are you?
Good, good. Can you first let us know a little bit about yourself and
Yeah.
then let us know a little bit about the topic we're discussing today?
Right. Okay. So I came out as I'm a Tanzanian ex-Muslim. Came out publicly a few months ago. And as part of my coming out, I decided to open a nonprofit called Faithless Hijabi, which is basically a connector for ex-Muslim women to talk to the world
Mm-hmm.
um, through their stories. So they send me their stories and I post them up anonymously. And it highlights the atrocities that have been committed, to these women in the name of Islam or, the misogyny that Islam advocates for. And a lot of these women are either in hiding or some of them have not come out yet. They're living double lives. Some of them are quite a bit like they're homeless, have been abused by their parents or by the community. They had to run away from their hometown. So it's pretty interesting to just listen to what other people had to say. Initially, I thought that I had it bad until I realized people living in the Middle East had it even worse. So I saw a gap there where Muslim women are facing a lot of abuse, especially being in the Middle East, and nobody was addressing those points. Like as Atheist Republic, we talk about atheism and all religions, but there was no focus on Muslim women. So that's when I started creating Faithless Hijabi.
So why is it called faithless hijabi? Aren't they supposed to be not hijabi?
Well, that's the thing. We actually have people who are faithless and hijabis.
Right.
But for me, it meant I dissected the title into two names. One, faithless, having no faith, and hijabi, particularly focusing on Muslim women.
Okay.
So
So they have to be hijabi because they what is that the
there,
reason?
no, well, not because they have to be hijabi for it to be on the page. It's just it's the name. The name is more to
Hmm.
engage people who know what hijabi means
Right.
to them. Like a lot of people, we know hijab has been forced onto us.
Right, right, right. So, okay, so what's it? What are we talking about today? I mean, I have a lot of notes and stuff that I want to ask you about, and maybe
Okay.
also looking at both the Facebook live chat and also the YouTube live chat. By the way,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff happening in the Facebook live chat. If you guys in the Facebook live chat, if you guys want me to read anything, make sure you mention Atheist Republic, or else I assume it's just a conversation between people in the live chat. I see we have Farhan and Beej on the YouTube live chat. But yeah, let's go ahead. So, do you want to give us like an intro, and then I could we get jump right into it because I have so many things. I don't even know if we're gonna have time to cover everything. But
It'll
go
be
on.
interesting. I'm interested to know what notes you have. I have not prepped, so I'm just
That's
gonna
okay.
go in. I'm gonna go in raw. So Armin and I are gonna talk about the role of women in Islam,
Mhm.
looking at it at more of a theological perspective, and I'm guessing you have more of what's currently happening and how they both intersect, how they're both they can be different from each other, but it's always used to mistreat women. And I would say the illusion of a lot of people that think that a woman's status is higher in Islam than any other religion, and I disagree. It's completely opposite. So yeah, it'll mostly be around how women have been treated, what they're meant to be doing, what their role is, their defined role in religion, in Islam particularly.
Right. So, I mean, going back to so when we're talking about Islam, like you mentioned, people have different uh, think about different perspectives. Most people outside of the Muslim community, when they say Islam and the role of women, they think about how in practice women in Islam live. But most, not most, I mean, most Islamic thinkers, if you could call them that, when they think about the role of Muslims, the role of women in Islam, they really don't think about how it's happening in practice. They're mostly thinking about the teachings of Islam and how it's meant to be, not how it is, right? And we could get into that as well. So the main and when it comes to the teachings of Islam, you have people that are true to the literal word of the Quran and the Hadith, and they usually, when we expose their views, people are like, okay, well, that's fucked up. And then we have the kind of Muslims that usually their views align more with progressive views, but that's their own personal views, and they try to match Islam with their own progressive and moderate views, and they come up with excuses for how that is, right? And there is some overlap here as well, because there are some fundamentalist views that still think, even with their fundamentalist viewpoint, even when we listen to them and think their views are barbaric, they think actually Islam, even with all of that, does respect women and has, make women's role, like, has a big role for women, and thinks they don't. There's nothing in Islam that is anti-woman, even with the beliefs that they have, which is very barbaric. But anyway, I just got a $20 super chat. That's amazing. We just got started by T.Y. Smith.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's very sweet. And he or she is saying, thanks for the important work, globally significant. Thank you. That's very sweet.
Oh,
Thank you. All right. So is that a good way to go about it? Like, so as you mentioned, we could talk about it from theological perspective as the teaching, and then go talk about it how it's actually in practice. But when it comes
yeah.
to theologically, there's three parts to that. There's some stories, and then there's the Quran, and there's the Hadith. When it comes to the stories, the main story that the number one story, and the first story that Muslims usually tell you, is is about how much women were mistreated before Islam, and how
Yeah.
much when Islam came, the rights of women actually increased, and women were treated better because of Islam, and relative to what it was before Islam, which they call the age of ignorance. Is that what they call it, right?
Yeah. Shahiliya.
Jahiliyyah, yeah. I mean, and the favorite example they have is that parents used to just bury their baby girls alive because they wanted boys, and Muhammad put a stop to that, right?
Yeah.
So, and then when Muhammad came, he actually gave women the right to own stuff, right? And some other rights, and that was a huge progress compared to what they had before. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not wrong that things changed when Muhammad came in, but they didn't change to what you would expect the Muslims think that it's happening now. Like Islam over time has not progressed to give women more rights. They've only given them minimal rights. So I think, yes, things have changed since Muhammad came in, but I'm not sure if that was holistically a change. Like maybe yes, women were buried less, but they're still being buried right now, right? So
Right.
it's like it's happening in India, it's happening in other parts, it's happening probably because of religion, probably because of culture. Like it hasn't been a significant change.
Uh,
Um,
well, I
Go
mean,
on.
sorry. Let me know. Don't let me interrupt you. Like, fight back if I am interrupting you.
Yeah.
Okay. Feel free to interrupt me. But my thinking is that if your standard is not burying baby girls, that's a very low standard to have, right? Uh,
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like in
yeah.
this day and age, if that's what we're comparing it to, then it really has not changed as much because it's happening in different parts, right? We've grown. Like our standard, like the standard then was people would not eat with forks and knives. They had no television, or they had, we were in a different era, but we have progressed as human beings to a different era.
Right.
And if that's what you're saying, that, oh, Muhammad brought those changes, and I'm like, and and the Quran still says there's no Quran 2.0 that says
Mm.
do not beat your wives,
Right.
or there's no, go on.
Right. No, no, you go on. Sorry.
Yeah, so
Don't
there's,
let me interrupt you. If I'm interrupting
then
you,
don't interrupt.
no, you should. Okay, go. I'll try not to. It's hard to not to.
So
Okay, go.
there, I don't think there's a Quran 2.0 that is going to go like, hey, so Muhammad did this in that time and he changed things,
Right.
but like now that we've progressed and we're not bearing our girls, we should probably stop hitting them. There's nothing that's happening. Like inheritance is a big part. There's women as witnesses. It's a big part, and I think we'll touch on it
Yeah.
as we move along. But it surprises me that even women in Islam, like not women in Islam, Muslim women, have excuses for it. They're like, oh no, this is why Muhammad was so smart at that time, 1,400 years ago, that he put these rules in place where women um, don't get much inheritance because men are the providers of the house. And that just makes me think, and I'm like, is that what you're going to bring up your daughters as? Like telling them that, hey, the person you marry is going to be the provider of your house, so you don't have to worry about it. Like, why put women through education then? Why even like put them through independence?
Well,
If
yeah.
that's
That's
Go
something
on.
we're gonna get. That's something we're gonna get to. But you're basically. Let me see if this is what you're saying is base. And what I want to say also is that even if it is better than what it was before, it's not good enough. It's not good enough at all. It's not even close, right? I mean, we're gonna get to some examples for why it's not a good enough. But when you have such a low standard, uh, beating that is not an achievement. And one thing and. Another thing is that we don't even know if that's true. For example, a lot of people say before Islam, women didn't have rights. They couldn't own property. But they also tell us that Khadija.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. But Khadija was like, this is pre-Islam, that she was the breadwinner. She was a
Right,
merchant's daughter, and she had taken over.
right,
And that was only one person that we knew about. Can you imagine others that we haven't heard of?
right. I mean, some of the gods they worshipped were female, but that doesn't tell us much before Islam. Another thing is that there was some. I mean, when we're talking about Arabia at that time, and again, none of these stories are necessarily real. We don't know how much of these stories are authentic. Muslims call them authentic, but they have their own standards, which doesn't and academically would not ever, you know, be accepted as a good standard for what they consider authentic. But when we're talking about these stories, we're talking about Muhammad and his stories as it is Islamic canon, not as it is real, because we don't know what percentage of these stories are real. We're just saying as accepted by Muslims and Islam, right? So, but even according to their own stories, Arabia at that time, Saudi Arabia today, was very different. Women in Mecca, for example, were treated very differently compared to women in Yathrib or Medina today, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Omar at some point when they did the hijrah, when they went from Mecca to Yathrib, he was pretty. Omar was pretty worried that the women from Mecca are going to learn from women in Yathrib to actually talk and speak back against, to not be obedient, which shows you that different parts of Arabia, there were different kinds of culture. So you can't just say like this was how it was. Oh, this is how it was. Did you send me a YouTube link?
I did not.
Oh, okay, never mind. So this is how it was during at that time, right? So that was one example. But yeah, go. You wanted to add something? Sorry. I got this.
It was also just what you said. It was also going back to Karbala and after Karbala, and people are like, Zainab was such a brave woman. She
Mm.
told everybody her story and she stood up for women's rights. to wear the hijab and to continue wearing the hijab and whatnot. And I was like, is that actually women's rights when you're covering them up? Like when they talk about their hijab being snatched, yes, that's not right. But at the same time, you're promoting a cloth that sexualizes women, that oppresses them. So is that actually then um, like liberating women?
Well, the covering up part is mostly the parts of practices today rather than the stories back then, because there is not much part of Muhammad's story or the hadith, well, the hadith maybe, but the Quran that actually tells women to cover up. The covering up part was mostly in Muhammad's house between his wife and people that were visiting, and it wasn't even a head covering, it was just a covering within the house. Did you know about this?
Oh, I didn't know about this, but I was actually talking about the time after Karbala.
Okay, so yeah, that was a lot.
So
That was
so a few
after.
years later, yeah, a few
Yeah.
years, a decade or something later, and that's what I was talking about. Still part of Islamic theology,
Yeah,
where
you're right.
yeah, where they were like they were still covering and Sakina and so Hussein's daughter, the grandson, so the Prophet's great granddaughter, yeah, great granddaughter.
Right.
She was like what, 6 or something, and she was covering up, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, why? I didn't get it, and I'm like, what? Do you just put a black cloth over your baby child, and you're like, oh, here, I'm going to treat her as an object that men cannot lust over?
Right. I mean, a lot of what became canon in Islam was decided many years after Muhammad. So the people after Muhammad did have a huge influence on what become part of Islam. Like a lot of people make it seem like it's just the Quran and Muhammad's life, but what is Muhammad's life was decided by many people many years later. And as we know, like a lot of people that came after Muhammad, especially Omar, was very, very I would say Omar was more misogynistic than Muhammad himself, which is he was the second Khalifa, right? He was
Yeah.
very anti-woman. Um, but the point that Muslims try to make is like, okay, look, listen, maybe if the standards in the Quran, some Muslim, again, this is some very minority progressive Muslim, so-called progressive Muslims. Most This is not at all representative of the four Islamic Sunni school of thought or other Shia 12er school of thought. When we talk about these progressive gymnastic arguments, a lot of people in the West or other non-Muslims think that these progressive arguments represents a huge part of the Islamic teaching. Most Islamic teachers or scholars, when they look at these progressive Muslims making these arguments, they fucking hate it. They hate it more than us that left Islam. They think these are either bid'ah or these are people that are misrepresenting Islam, which is a huge sin in Islam, right?
Yeah,
So
well, that's where ISIS stems from as well, right? ISIS is still Muslim. They're still considered Muslims, and any progressive values, even like Malala, just educating women, is a progressive value. And she was, and like by Al Qaeda, she was threatened, right?
what
So
Malala
it
Taliban, yeah,
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 Taliban.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, she was threatened. She's still being threatened by other people, and
right,
ISIS will threaten other women. Boko Haram in Nigeria kidnapping schoolgirls.
right.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Any progressive thought by Muslims, some Muslims, are not advocated by Islam.
Right. So the argument by these progressive Muslims is that, look, when Islam came, it made the bad situation better, right? So you know how in law we have like the spirit of the law. So basically,
Yeah.
if you take that philosophy, the goal is to continue make giving women more rights, right? You shouldn't just stop with what the Quran teaches or what the Hadith teaches. If you see that there was a natural progress from before Muhammad to now, then you should take that lesson and go further, and that would basically get you to what the progressive values we have today.
Yeah,
And
but then you know what that means then, that there will be no Islam if we continue doing that, which is good. I'm supportive of that because, like I said, there is no Islam 2.0 or there is no Islam 3.0 because we're
right,
like, even outside religion, women, we came from a time where women weren't allowed to vote,
right,
right? That women weren't allowed to work. They weren't allowed to go out of the house. And it was the West that started doing it. I
right.
think Australia was one of the first countries that allowed women to vote.
Right, and yeah, that's a very important point that you made because basically what these people are saying is that, so does that mean that the Quran and the Hadith is irrelevant now? Like, can we just put that aside? Because you can't at the same time claim that the Quran is a religion for all people at all times, and also argue that the goal is to become better. Because now you're saying the teachings that are in the Quran and Hadith should be put aside, right? Like the Quran itself says that this is supposed to be the teaching that we're supposed to follow, and Muhammad's way of life is a role model for all humans at every time, at every location, right? And if you say no, we need to move past that, then you're basically going against. And this is why most Muslims or most Islamic thinkers will hate you, because you're basically arguing for making the Quran and Hadith irrelevant, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course. Even when I was just like diverting from the topic, like even when I was an advocate for like gay rights or just being progressive, that it's okay not to wear hijab or like women shouldn't be that, the very famous Candy photo or the meme where they're like, this
Oh
is a
yeah.
covered lollipop, this is
Right.
a covered lollipop, and this is the value of a woman. And then when you remove the cover, there are bugs that come on it, and I'm like, are you comparing me to a candy, like a lollipop, or like a diamond? It was also Muhammad Ali who gave his daughter a lecture about like women covering, and I was like, for somebody who claims to be Muslim and goes topless to fights and boxing, why is there double standards with
Mm,
what your daughter wears? If you
right.
can go topless, why can't she go topless?
No,
That
they
should be
can't.
her choice.
Yeah. The candy example is what I refer to it is like they're basically comparing you to a used product. That's what it
Yeah,
is, right?
right.
All right, but let's go to some specific examples. Uh, and this is the most famous one, right? I think you know the Quran 4:34.
Yeah.
Uh, so it says men are in charge. This is the Quran, by the way. This is not Hadith. I know there's a very few fringe minority Muslims that are Quranists, which they completely put the Hadith aside. But that's a
Yeah.
very fringe group, because if you put the Hadith away, 95% of Islam just goes away.
Yeah.
Because most rules from in Islam comes from the Hadith, not the Quran. But anyways, the Quran, but this is Quran, so this you can't get more higher than this,
Authentic.
authentic
Yeah, of
than this,
course.
right? In according to Muslims, so this Quran 4:34 says, Men are in charge of women by what Allah has given one over the other, and what they spend from their wealth. So the first part is saying men are in charge, and why is that in charge? Because the rights that God gave one over the other, and because men spend their wealth. So men bring their bacon, so that's why they're in charge. So right, and then continues. It says, so righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in their husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. But those wives, and now this is turns into a commandment. The rest of, so the first part was just telling you how things work, but now it turns into telling you what to do. So, and this is when the Quran is making orders or making commandments, it's
Yeah.
very clear that it's not talking to women. Like, it's assuming that whoever is reading this book is a man. So it
Yeah.
says, but where is it? Where did I go? Okay. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, first advise them, then if they persist, forsake them in bed. Basically, don't give them sex. That's a punishment, apparently. And and finally, strike them. So you could beat the shit out of them if those two first steps don't work.
Or as Zakir Naik says, hit them lightly with the feather. It's a symbolic beating.
With the hit them light. That's more like tickling. Is with the feather. That's like I don't know if that's worse or better.
That's torture for some people who don't like being tickled.
But okay, so one thing that the interesting part is that it doesn't even say if they disobey. It says if you fear disobedience. So they don't even
Exactly.
they
This
don't
is
even
what I was this is
go,
what I was going
go.
to touch on. It's like insecure, it's highlighting insecurities for men, right? They're
Right.
like, if you're threatened by your woman, like, maybe like she's not covering enough, don't have sex with her. Like,
Right.
don't like go beat her, or tell her. I had an interesting post, or it was a comment where where I quoted the same hadith, and some of the responses were, one of the girls said, yeah, if I go astray, I want my husband to beat me and like put me to the right path. And I was like, what? And I'm like, would you beat your husband then? And she's like, why would I do that? And I'm like, what kind of violent relationship do you have with your partner? Like, what, like, how are you okay with this? The fact, and they're like, yeah, but like beating is symbolic, like it doesn't have to mean anything, you don't have to beat them. And I'm like, my point being, why does this verse exist?
Right.
Why is it just aimed at one party? Why was it even written in the first place? Why does it have to highlight that men are the breadwinners? There's a difference between the current situation that was happening, where women weren't allowed to work. It's not because they were incapable of, but they
Right.
weren't allowed to work, and men were. And they're like, okay, so now that you're allowed to work, yes, obviously, if you're going to marry her and have kids with her, you'll have to provide for her, right? But we're in an era that it's changing. Like, I want a house husband. I'm okay with that. I'm not gonna strike him if he doesn't obey. But um, yeah, no, it's changing. And the thing is that if God was all knowing, or if Muhammad had known that this was going to happen in the future, then why was it there in the first place? Why does a verse exist for people to then even take it out of context,
Right.
or to have different interpretations of it?
Right.
Um, and
So
what does obeying even mean? Like, why? Like, it doesn't matter what gender it is. Why does that even exist? Like, what are we then teaching kids or younger generations when they read the Quran and we talk about it and about this verse? What are we teaching them
yeah.
about relationships, or like any relationships, right? It's meant to be a mutual understanding.
Yeah.
Why does there have to be a power dynamic there?
Well, yeah. I mean, the main excuses people make for this. I mean, first of all, tell you about the excuses, um, the when it says, first of all, as I mentioned, it doesn't say if they're disobedient, if you fear
Yeah.
disobedience. The second part is that it doesn't say that you can beat them. It's actually a commandment to beat them, right? So if you're a Muslim man and you really read this literally, and you don't even want to beat your wife, you might read this. It doesn't say you're allowed to beat your wife. It says you beat them. It's a
Yeah.
commandment, so you
Yeah.
have to beat them, right? So the excuses. The first excuse is that it's a light beating, all right? The second excuse is that it's been mistranslated. It doesn't even mean beating. It means walking towards, right? The third excuse, what's the third excuse? Well, actually, the third excuse is that it's okay to beat your wife, right? But the first one, that is light beating, is actually they use some hadith that says, they ask Muhammad what they should beat them with, and he said, oh, with the toothbrush. So that shows that it's a light beating, right?
Yeah, the
Which
miswak.
the miswak, yeah. Which is interesting because this hadith basically makes the second excuse, that this is not even beating, throws that out of the water, because they're talking about how to beat your wife in the hadith, right? So it can't be walking towards your wife if they are talking if
If
they
that
have,
even exists,
right.
exactly.
Second of all, the problem with light beating is that don't fucking beat anybody, even if it's light beating, right? Because it's demeaning. Like, you're showing what is the position of your wife in your
Exactly.
family if you're actually beating them, right?
Exactly. And it's also the emotional abuse that goes with just reading that, or just even quoting that, hey, I'm allowed to beat you if you don't obey me, right?
Right.
Um, I feel like people, when they recite that nikah, they should also have that verse in it, like read it out to them, and then consider whether they actually want to get married,
And
because that is that right of the husband to do.
and okay, so let's say light beating is better than full on beating the crap out of your wife, right?
Yeah.
That's not in the Quran. Nowhere in the Quran does it say, hey, by the way, beat them lightly, right? Like if that
So,
was an important part, maybe mention it somewhere, right? It's not
yeah.
anywhere in the fucking ayat that tells them that, hey, okay, beat them, but make sure it's lightly, okay? You see a lot of translation, they put lightly in the brackets. The reason why it's in brackets because it's not in the actual fucking Arabic part of the ayah.
Yeah, and a
Right.
lot of people will go like, "Oh, but it's tapping them." And one of somebody commented like, "What if you're?" And I'm like, that's still abuse, right? Like it is still abuse. It's not how hard you hit somebody; it's the intention behind it. The
Right.
fact that you also wanted to beat them, that's emotional abuse. That's mental abuse as well. And it's somebody said, "What if a friend beats you? Are you also going to call them violent and abusive?" And I'm like, "Yes, I don't know what kind of friends you have, but I don't have my friends who beat me. That's not how it works."
Right. So actually, in the Facebook live chat, person Vail is saying azrabuhunna. That's the verb, right? And the
Hmm.
which means beat them, right? And the
Right.
the root Arabic word for that is zaraba, right? Zaraba,
Yeah.
which means beating, right? And so
Yeah.
the second excuse is that it doesn't mean. This could also mean walk towards them, right? And
Yeah.
there's several reasons why that's absolute fucking bullshit. First of all, for 1400 years, Arab scholars did commentary on the Quran and read the Quran, and they all thought that this means beat them,
Yeah.
right? Only when our modern value system and morality improved for us to know that this is fucking barbaric, did they all of a sudden some people feel like, hey, maybe this means something else. So that second of all, within the with the way azrabuhunna is used, it's very obvious that it means hitting. And
Yeah.
Ali Rizvi in his book The Atheist Muslim does a very good job in explaining that. One example I give to people is that if anybody, any Arab speaker reading this knows that this means hitting, it doesn't mean walking towards. And but to make that clear is like imagine a non English speaker, if you like in a baseball game you hear somebody says strike three or something like that, and you try to explain it to somebody and it's like, oh, the players are on strike, this is a union thing. You know that that's bullshit. You know within the context what strike
Yeah.
means in this context, right? So
Of
anybody
course.
reading this verse knows exactly what strike means here, right? I
Of
mean,
course.
yeah. And another point is the hadith that we mentioned that makes it clear that this is about hitting. It has nothing to do with walking. I mean, it doesn't make any sense with the natural
For
progression.
like
Yeah.
what? What does walking towards even mean? Like protest against them? What
No.
are you going to do? What are you going to do? Like not do your dishes, not do your chores
I,
because she doesn't obey you?
well, they might say like at the end, just walk towards her, accept her, and then, but it's fucking bullshit, and because of the way Azrabuhunna is used. And another thing is that we know, even let's be the most charitable we can possibly be. Let's say okay, it could mean walking towards too, right? At best, the God, this Allah guy, is fucking idiot when it comes to communicating because he knows the word zaraba could also mean hitting, right? Which it doesn't. Here it absolutely means hitting. Here it doesn't mean anything else because of the way it's used. But even if it could mean something else, why would you use a verb that could so easily be confused with hitting and making so many poor Muslim women be abused because of your stupid communication method? Like, come on, right? But
It
anyways.
was, yeah, it was, I think in your podcast I mentioned Albania by mistake, but it was Algeria. It was one of the countries where beating was considered so normal that women are like, yeah, we want to be beaten by our husbands when they're jealous or we don't listen to them. It shows that they care. And I'm like, really? Is this, are you sure? And like, what is this mentality right now? Um, it surprises me that a lot of people are like, do not read the Quran literally, and they're like, there's so many meanings, and you need to go to a scholar and whatnot, and I'm like, I'll be your scholar. I can sugarcoat anything for you if you want me to,
Yes.
right? I can like anybody can do that, right? Like, what does a scholar even do? They'll look at the same hadith and they'll look at different hadiths and then like read the Quran and just make something up that is acceptable. Like that's not good enough. What t-shirt are you wearing? Is that the Atheist Republic t-shirt or is it
No,
just a t-shirt?
no. I want to wear the Atheist Republic shirt on my on my shows, but I think like it's too promotional if I do that. Is that
Yeah.
okay? Is that too cliche? I don't know. Maybe I should. Um, but
You should send me one.
okay, you should buy one.
but like I but like I'm cheap.
Okay.
Hold on, I'm just gonna get water. One sec.
All right, no worries. Let me see what people are saying in the live chat while you're away. Okay, so Beach is asking, did these rules also apply to Adam and Eve? No, no, Beach, they didn't, because in Islam, they were Muslim as well according to Islam, but they didn't get the full version of Islam. Only the Quran is the full version of Islam. Moose saying, I'm referring, I don't know what it. I haven't seen the full message of that. B just saying the morality police can also beat the woman. So how does that work when the instruction is only to beat to the husband? Actually, that's a good question. Well, I think if you are part of the government, you have authority over all your subjects, I guess. Yeah, I don't know about that. That's a very interesting point, Beej. I don't know the details about that. I was gonna mention something. I forgot. You were saying something
About
about.
inheritance?
No, 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 no. I was gonna bring up something else, but I forgot. Such a good point. I keep every time I forget something, it's the best points I was
You need
gonna
to
bring up.
write it down.
I have so many things in front of me. Okay. Let me see. Azrabohuna. Yeah, I guess I was gonna bring up one more excuse that people give. Fuck. It's okay. I'll think about it later.
Well, it'll come back to you later.
Well, we're moving to the next verse. Um, it's okay. Okay, so next verse is Quran 4:23. Basically, Surah 4 is the most anti-woman surah in the Quran.
It's Surah Nisa, right?
Yeah,
Surah like Nisa is women.
right, yeah. It's named after women, which is fitting. So this one was actually, when I read it, when I was in transition between Islam and out of Islam, this was one of the most shocking ones to me. And it's very interesting that this is not as problematic as the wife beating verse. And I have a theory for why this second one, which I think is worse than the first one, does not mention as much. So this one says, also prohibited are, so basically this is the context of this is that God is telling you a whole bunch of stuff that is prohibited to you, and by you it means the male reader, because obviously women are not the audience here. Also prohibited are women already married, except, and this is when I was shocked, as a
Okay.
because it said to me when I was reading it, it says that women who are already married are prohibited to you. I'm like, well, obviously, right? But then it
Yeah.
said except. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what is this? Like the Quran, which is supposed to be the most conservative book that there is, like the standard for life and everything, is telling me there's exception here. So there are married women in that I am allowed to have sex with. How is that? What is this exception? And then it goes, except those women, those whom your right hands possess. Okay? And this is in reference to women that you capture in war. Right? So, women that you capture, so slave women, right? So, women, if you're in war and you're fighting for
Yeah.
Allah and you capture women, it doesn't fucking matter if they're married. She's yours now. Okay? And it doesn't, this is rape and slavery in the same fucking verse. This is not telling you that okay, obviously if you capture your right hand possesses, right? This does not sound like asking for consent, right? This does not suggest like, hey, you capture them and then what? Like they all of a sudden you capture them in war, are they going to marry you out of their own will? This is absolute
This is
treating.
the definition of like sexual slavery, except to capture them. Why? Like, what is another word for capture in Arabic? Can somebody please clarify that? Tell me that this does not exist. I want a scholar to just go like, oh no, this did not exist. It did exist. Why are people making excuses for Muhammad's acts? Like, there were sex slaves and they did exist, and there are verses about it. I don't like every time I have a list of questions when people go like, but Islam is a beautiful religion, and these are the questions I ask. And they're like, no, you've got it all wrong. You need to see a scholar. And I'm like, so you have the right to tell me that I've got it all wrong, but you can't even like clarify it.
But I have so many scholars, like for every, like there are so many fucking. Most scholars agree with these verses. Most scholars shred history for 40 so-called scholars, because I don't know what I mean. They're like scholars in like wizardry, but they're so-called scholars for 1400 years. The Arab-speaking scholars, okay. I'm not talking about the Indonesian scholars or the Pakistani scholars or the Bangladeshi scholars. Which, if I refer to them, you're gonna be like, well, they don't speak Arabic. Arab-speaking scholars for 1400 years. Most of them, they have tafsir, they have commentary. They saw the wife-beating verse as wife-beating. That's how they saw it. They saw this verse as capturing slaves in wars. That's how they saw it for 14 fucking hundred years. So don't talk to me about scholars, because I bring you all the scholars you want. But
And what excuse are they going to give them possibly? Like, okay, so there are okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate. Okay, there are some verses that talk about empowering women, or well, I was told that Jannah lies in the feet of your mother, and you should always respect your mother. And I'm like, of course, given, yes, it's not exclusive to Islam that you need to respect your mother. But people go like, no, but like that's what the Quran mentions. And I'm like, does that actually negate the fact that there are all of these other things in the Quran?
actually,
Like,
that's already a problem, because people, when Muslims want to mention that Islam respects women, they say like, oh, Islam says that heaven is under the mother's feet and stuff like that, right? First of all, that for me, that means that if you're not a mother, you're not really a complete woman, right? Like that's
that
already.
is that is true, and that is true. And I'm like, and given that I never want kids, I'm just like, okay, well,
Right.
here goes. Like,
It,
and what about like even like adoption and hijab? So I really wanted to adopt, and my mom was like, "No, have your own kids." And I'm like, and they're like, "So what happens when you adopt a girl and she has to wear hijab next to her like your husband or
hmm,
your partner and her father, and then the other way around, if you have a son, you have to wear hijab."
right.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Why?"
I mean,
It's
yeah, you're right.
going.
No, I just want to, I just have a problem with the using the word mother and woman interchangeably, as if that's the end game for a woman. Like that's the final level.
Yeah, like a lot of women think that that's it, like getting married, your praying namaz is more gives you more sawab than it does when you're not married. And that's the importance of marriage, and people make it as their goal to marry and procreate because of create like increasing the ummah and whatnot. And I'm like, well, is that really all your goals?
Right. By the way, Muscal is asking in the live chat, what is the best way to get Muslim women out of their oppressive lifestyle? By getting them to stop being Muslim. Um,
Can I answer that?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I would say education. A lot of the women are in cognitive dissonance. Like they have their biases, and it's cognitive dissonance. Um, And, I think once you put facts out there and people go like, no, but like that's not Islam. And I'm like, no, but this is in the book. And they can choose to say, okay, well, this is not what I follow. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm happy with that. And then it's slowly breaking little things like that. Well, that's how it broke out for me. It was slowly little things like this. The misogyny got to me really quick. LGBT rights got to me really quick, to a point where I was like, I have modified my version of Islam to not be compatible with anybody else's, or even the like even the religion itself. Like I've just made this my own religion. Like that's what I'm doing. And that's when I was like, okay, well, I am an ex-Muslim now, because none of this makes sense to me. I don't like it. The more I looked into it, the more I was educated about it, um, the more I got out of it.
Right.
And I think it's easier for women to come out of Islam once you highlight the misogyny in it and the abuse in it.
Right. So, can I go back to that verse? By the way, I
Hmm.
want to mention a
Hmm.
few things. Um, Two things. First of all, the reason why I think this verse is not as famous as the wife beating verse is because it doesn't resonate with people as much. I mean, right now, wife beating is a problem. Like people, husbands do actually beat their wives, right? There's not that much. I mean, other than ISIS areas and I don't know, maybe Libya right now.
Yeah,
There isn't that many people going around and capturing women as slaves as booty in war, right? So that's
yeah,
why it doesn't resonate with people as much,
right now.
and it doesn't scare them. But the wife beating is something that actually could be used more often in practice, and it actually does hurt women more in practice, maybe now more than before. That's why I think this Quran 434 is talked about more than Quran 423, which is the capturing women as slaves. Even though this one is definitely way more barbaric, right? Um,
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to mention um, about the whole consent thing, which we brought up in this verse. There is no mention of consent anywhere in Islam. Like we have this whole concept of zina, but that's more about
Yeah.
not doing anything with other people's women as property because it's theirs. But it's
So
yeah, go on.
basically, marital rape is not considered as rape. Like, marital rape is just part of you signing up for marriage.
And it makes it a lot worse where you have no say in who you marry, right? So basically, when Islam talks about marriage, you
Yeah.
capturing somebody in war and raping them is also categorized as marriage, right?
Yeah. A
That's
lot of a lot of
that's what they
people a
call
lot of
marriage, right? Go on.
a lot of people went. I think the one excuse I remember now that we talk about it for sexual slavery was after war was that Muhammad had to take care of these people and he had to provide for them. And I'm like, okay, so he has the money and he has to provide for them. Why does he need to have sex with them? Like, why does he need to marry them? Why does he need to do mutah with them or anything? Like, why? You can still provide for people. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I know people who still like I give money to charity. I'm not going to go start marrying those people and go like, oh, but this is right because I'm paying for you.
Right. Oh my god. I mean, just to tell you how bad. So the reason why consent is never mentioned anywhere in Islamic teaching, Hadith or the Quran,
Because
is
it doesn't exist. There
because
is
they
no
did.
such thing as women being able to say no.
I mean, they did. I think they didn't even think that this is an issue. Like this was not even a question. Like obviously, if you want a woman, the only permission you need is the current owner. And if she's not the current owner is the father, right? And if she's a
Yeah.
slave, if she's a free woman, the current owner is the father, and if she's a slave, the current owner is the whoever owns her right now. And if the current owner is not a Muslim, then you don't even need permission. You could just defeat the enemy and capture her. So nowhere in any of these transactions anybody asks the woman if she's okay with any of that. Never even crossed their mind to talk about that. That's how big of a non-issue this was for them. And to tell you how bad it gets, Muhammad himself at some point has sex, or to be more accurate, rapes,
Yeah.
and as they call Mary, the woman that he killed the father of on the very fucking same day. Imagine being her, being raped by the man that just killed your father.
But he was spreading Islam, so it's okay.
Oh yeah, he was.
See, I hope people understand my sarcasm. It's just, yeah, you're right. It doesn't make sense to me. It's like killing the whole tribe and then taking the women and raping them. That's what ISIS. Isn't that what ISIS does right now?
Yeah,
Isn't
yeah.
that what they do? They kill the men and the babies, and then they keep the
No, no, they
boys.
don't.
They
Okay,
keep,
so what Muhammad did? Okay, this actually so this is it's actually really bad. So what he did at some point, he killed around 600 Jews in one fucking day, right? And all the boys, if they had pubic hair, they were killed. If they didn't had, they mean they were children, so they were sold as slaves, the boys, and all the
oh,
women and little boys were sold as slaves, the Jewish boys and all the women, and the money that they got from selling them as slaves was used to buy weapons. This is authentic Islamic canon, by the way, guys. Go look it up.
interesting. I
Yeah,
did not know about that.
it's so fucked up. Um, yeah. So let's go to the legal status of women, and it seems like both the examples when it comes to status of women uh, considers them to be 50% of men. And the two examples that we have is inheritance and also when it comes to testimony, right? In
Yeah.
both cases, they're half of men. So if the inheritance of girls is half of what men are, and also when it comes to testimony in court is half of what men's are, and these are both Quranic verses. I don't know if the blood money is Quranic verse as well, because I remember in Iran, for example, this is how this translates into modern life. In Iran, there was this elementary school for girls that was that was on fire, and a lot of little girls were burned alive. And what happened was this was negligence and stuff, and they had to be paid. The parents had to be paid, and they got paid half as much as what they would have if they were little boys being burned alive.
How, wait, how is that fair?
Well, I mean,
How is that, well, how is that, I don't even know what to say anymore. Like, that's, like, does that mean that a value of a woman's life is worth less than a man,
it does according
according
to
to
Islam.
Islam?
Yeah, it does according to Islam, and he will bring this. We're not making this shit up, guys. I bring you the specific
Yeah.
examples, right? So the a woman, so half the inheritance, that's Quran. Wait, is that
So
for? Yeah,
half the inheritance is something that really annoys me.
right.
It just shows that you don't value your daughters as much as the boys. And I know, a lot of, like I said, a lot of moderate Muslims, and quotation mark, would not actually do it that way. But according to Islam, that's what you're meant to do,
Right,
right?
right,
And and the reason you get is because they're like, men are the breadwinners, and because they are the breadwinners, they have to support their whole family, so they need more money from their parents. And I'm like, what about women? What if that woman was in trouble? What if that woman is a single mother, right?
right.
What if that woman was a breadwinner? It just really irks me, because I'm just like, why is this even there? Like why does inheritance sharing have to be different between a gender,
Right.
and not like calculated through what's needed, what's not needed, or
Well, actually the excuse is that men know how to handle money more than women, which is interesting because um, microfunding.
no.
Microfunding is a very tested and proven method to help people get out of poverty. So instead of actually
Okay.
giving them the money, you loan them microfunds, and for them not to spend it, but for them to invest it in a small business, and then once the business recovers, they pay the money back, and that has been
Yeah.
proven a very good method of bringing people out of poverty. And
Yeah.
some of the studies suggested that actually giving the microfunds to women has been shown to be more effective than to men, right? So I mean, I'm not trying to be like a virtue signaling here. Okay, these are actual studies done. Maybe somebody could tell me if I'm wrong on this or not, right?
I
Uh,
mean, I'd like to say I'm a living example, but not all women are like me,
yeah,
and
that's anecdotal. Right.
I may be an anomaly because according to Quran, I shouldn't be able to work
Right.
or provide for the family.
But another example is okay. So this was Quran 4:11. Just if anybody wants to check these out to see that we're not making this stuff up. Okay. By the way, if you're looking at translations, be mindful of looking Sahih International because they try to add in brackets stuff sometimes is like stuff that is actually makes it a little bit more PC and friendly. So Pictol is a better one, but look at all the translations and compare the translations just so that you could have an understanding of what the whole thing is. But there's another one, Quran 2, Surah 2, Ayah 282. It says, get two witnesses out of your own men, and if there are not two men, then a man and two women, such as you choose for witnesses, so that if one of them errs, the other can remind her. So basically, if you can't find two men as witness, you just get one man and two women. So because obviously, if the dumb woman, if one of them is too stupid, maybe the other one could come.
What does that even mean? I'm reading the verses as you're speaking,
Right.
and that is more than just the sight of Allah and stronger as evidence and more likely to prevent doubt between you. Like, I'm just reading the whole thing and I'm like, what is that? Like, why? Why does this exist? What is a woman being stupid or like the things that I've been told as hormonal fluctuations or like being on their periods and PMSing. Boys PMS too. Okay. They have mood swings too. They're human beings. A lot of people, like, a lot of the men have this thing that men are meant to be the providers. They're better at, like, being decision makers and witnesses because of their aesthetics.
Mm.
And, I think it was Jordan Peterson that highlights that a lot. Um, Jordan Peterson, I think that one of his video, he talks about how being a woman, not a lot of women want to go for leadership position because it's a lot of work that's put into it, and that has more to do with the way women think. That is differently than the way men think. Like men think about houses and money, and women think about starting a family, and that's based purely on stats, right?
Right.
And that really annoys me because that puts people in a box saying this is what other women have been thinking and this is how you should be thinking because that's the normal now,
Right.
right?
Right.
And and Islam plays a role in it, not for what Jordan Peterson said, but all these religions play a role in it because they undermine women so much. Um, and the role of women in general has just changed a lot over time, and nobody takes that into account because we're looking at stats in the past,
Right.
right? The newer stats talk about men being vulnerable, which is a sign of strength, and people are like, no, but that's considered weakness because men shouldn't cry. We bring up our boys to play with cars and and action figures, and our girls to play with dolls. And then, talk about marriage and stuff. We've already from a very young age told the girls that this is your status and this is how you're meant to grow up. And then this verses come in, and being a Muslim, you're like, oh, well, so my mom was right. Like, I am going to get married and I'm not as brave as men. I know as a child, I wanted to be a boy. Like, I was like, why am I not a boy? Because I can't carry this.
Oh,
Like,
really? You wanted to be a boy as a child?
well, not like because like I thought women were weaker, and I couldn't carry this thing that was like 10 or 8 kilos, and I was 11 years old, and I was like, why can I not carry this? Because men can carry it. And my dad sat me down, and he's like, what a man can do, a woman can do better. That's what he told me. And ever since then, I would like, being the middle child, I was the first one that went to university, got my degree, started getting my own job. I'd enjoyed the family business. And that was very helpful to me. because, well, I was brought up in a liberal society, like a liberal family. However, my mom was very different than that. And she was like, why are you studying so much? You're going to get married and have kids, and that's it. And, here I am. I'm like 25, not married, guys, which is great. But no, and it's just all of this plays a part where they go like, girls shouldn't go out late, or girls should wear a hijab, or girls should be protected. And I'm like, we need to raise our daughters to be brave and not say like, and not like prevent them from taking those risks.
Right.
And that's why, just getting back to Faithless Hijabi, the point that I'm trying to make with the whole page is not only about women in Islam, it's just trying to lift women up. Like, I'll talk about mental health on my post, and I'll talk about, so I'm in engineering, so I talk about, like, I run another nonprofit that encourages women in the data analytics field. And for me, it's so important that women know their value and status in life in general, and then analyze it when they go to Islam and they're like, Islam is not giving us all of this. It's only misogynistic. So the more learned women get, the more they will the more they will be able to analyze the Quran for what it is, which is misogynistic.
Right.
And the whole witness thing just really annoys me. The whole witness inheritance, like, wife beating is one of it, but this now touches a different level where
Hmm.
you've set a gender role for people. The wife beating is abuse, and that is not right. But like, this to, like,
This is about
the witness and the
value. If
inheritance.
this is
Exactly.
right.
This touches more core on women's roles in the society.
Right.
And when you tell them they're not enough, or they're stupid, or they're not going to be smarter than men, and that's now you shaping future generations. Thankfully, that's changing. Like, a lot, like the one of the boxers is a woman. She's a Muslim woman, and she's like, this is not how Muslim women should act. And my parents have always told me that, so I went to classes in secret, and now she's doing it for the Olympics.
Right. Yeah, I want to address something in the live chat, which is actually a very good point. Because to bring up, a lot of people say, whenever you tell a translation to a Muslim, they always say it's wrong translation. Um, yeah, and you don't know Arabic. Well, I mean, the great thing about that is that, first of all, don't bother learning Arabic. If okay, even after you learn Arabic, they tell you that you don't know the classical Arabic, and then when you learn classical Arabic, they tell you that you're not a scholar. And even if then you become a scholar, they tell you, well, you're not the right school of Islamic thought. So that game will never end. The point is that um, if they don't agree with the translation, just point to them that the hadith, the commentary on the Quranic verses by Arab scholars makes it clear that they had the exact same translation in mind. The commentary, the tafsir, the commentary, and we're talking about the commentary on the verses from scholars close to Muhammad's time, right? So the one that were in the same culture, same time, same, and this is across the fucking board, right? So then they're gonna say, well, they were corrupted. Like, oh yeah, okay, all of them were corrupted. Like, honestly, anything you disagree, as long as you disagree with them, they're gonna say that you have the wrong interpretation, right? The only interpretation that they are not willing to accept is the most obvious, clear one right in front of them. Another point is,
And also,
yeah,
if Quran is meant to be translated by scholars, then why are there other people following the religion, right?
right,
Why are there other people? Why would you become a doctor? Well, like, why would you study medicine if there are already enough doctors, right?
right,
Like, why would people blindly follow a faith that they have no understanding of, because they're like, oh, we're going to ask a scholar, but for now it's fine. Why would you even have unanswered questions?
right.
I have this debate with my friends every time, and they're like, "You need to see a scholar," or like, "You need to ask," and I'm like, "What are they going
We
to tell
have
me?"
talked to scholars.
And they're like, "Who have you talked to? Have you talked to this guy?" And I'm like, "What difference does it make? Another version of sugarcoating. Why would I want to put myself through that? It's a waste of my time."
Right.
And if you do not like being questioned, then don't like if you do not like my answers, don't ask me questions then.
When they say you have to talk to scholars, what they're saying is that you have to talk to scholars that agree with me. That's what they mean.
Exactly.
By the way, somebody is in the Facebook live stream. Nader is asking, "What about the hadith?" The hadith also makes the Quran a lot more clear. Like, because a lot of the hadith is considered authentic, especially the Bukhari one and Sahih Muslim by Sunnis and the Kafi by the Shias. So, and all those Sahih makes these translation a lot more clear. So the hadith helps to destroy all these apologetic arguments about the verses, and a lot of these verses, the thing is that when you're reading a Quran, you can't just read it cover to cover. There's a lot of stories around each one of these verses, right? And when you read the stories and the background behind each one of these sources, it makes it clear that these translations are correct. It's interesting because a lot of Muslims ask, when you bring up a verse and you tell them what they mean, they say like, "Oh, you have to read it in context." They're like, "Yeah, I have read it in context. It doesn't help. It makes my case stronger when you read it in context." Anyways.
Yeah, I know what you were going to say. No, I definitely get it. It's just a coward's exit, to be honest. It's actually a coward's exit when they're like, "Oh, but the interpretation's wrong," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? What other interpretation can this possibly have? What other sugarcoating can you have? How are you going to paint this in rainbows and butterflies
Right. So
to actually
yeah,
go
go ahead.
on
Sorry. No, you go ahead.
to actually make this acceptable by anyone?"
Right.
What happens to Muslim men living in the Middle East that refuse to beat their wives? Well,
Yeah.
nothing happens to them. They're just being very, um, they're just they're just not being very Islamic right now. Like,
Yeah. A lot of these household stuff are not enforced. Like even in Iran, where hijab is mandatory, or in Saudi Arabia, nobody's coming and checking in your private house if you're
of
praying,
course.
right? And even if they find out that you're not praying 5 times a day, nothing is going to happen to you. Most of the so-called sins that there's a punishment for it are the public ones, or yeah. Anyways, that's fiqh, and there's so much detail. Yeah, go on, sir.
And and it's also like the sin or the fear or the punishment is more about the hereafter, right? Which is still
Right,
a fear, right? For those like I don't believe in it, but for those who do believe in it, it's still existent to them, right?
right.
And it
Like
it
drinking alcohol,
surprises.
for example, could get you punishment, right?
Yeah,
But not missing your prayer doesn't gets you punishment in the afterlife, but not in this life, right?
but but
There's
it
so many
but
details. Yeah.
but it's also like with like missing a prayer, you can always pray kaza and like you can pray before you die
Tobe.
or whatnot.
Yeah. So Muscal is asking, what does it say about the Muslim female that stays with her husband that beats them? I mean, it
Well,
doesn't say much because it expects you to stay. Like you don't have a choice to. I mean, divorce is not very easy for Muslim women. You don't have a choice.
and
Uh,
plus, if you've been brought up around knowing that this is your status in religion, you're
hmm,
not going to actually refute it, right? What are you going to do? Go against God and go in the hellfire because your Muslim husband actually did what he was commanded to do?
right. And again, there's
That he had the right to do that?
right. By the way, just to be clear, we're talking about teachings versus practice, and the teachings influence the practice, but it's not a one-on-one correlation here, right? So every time I say, "Well, you don't have it right," people are like, "Well, I'm a Muslim and I get to do this," or they keep giving you anecdotes and examples. They're like, "Yeah, they're in practice, many Muslims don't live according to Islam, right?" But that doesn't mean that these teachings doesn't impact and doesn't ruin a lot of people's lives. It does, but that doesn't mean that there is a 100% correlation between the belief and the practice. Obviously, it's going to manifest itself in many different ways, mostly negative, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a exact mirror image of the teaching. So discussing the practice and discussing the teachings are two separate topics. And then the third separate topic is how the teaching influences the practice. Oh, Nick is saying, "Who is your amazing guest?" I missed that part.
I was just gonna say, I promise I look a lot like my photos. So if you're following me on Facebook,
Well,
I
before I go, okay, so for people that join in halfway, I'm gonna go into hadith and what Muhammad said about women specifically. But before I do that, can you reintroduce yourself to people that joined in halfway?
Oh, right. Okay, cool. Perfect. Hi, everyone. We have 21 watching and a lot on Facebook. I am a Tanzanian ex-Muslim. I live in Australia now. I consider myself to be more Australian, but I also run a nonprofit called Faithless Hijabi, which basically empowers ex-Muslim women, or women in doubt, hiding, by sharing their stories to the world. So a lot of them are not able to come forward, write about their stories, what they think that's happening wrong, whether it's the cultural that's associated with Islam, or Islam itself that has influenced the abuse on them. So they send me the stories, and I post them anonymously. And it's more about educating both sides, even no, all sides, non-Muslim women, Muslim women, and everybody else, so the men as well. And I think it's a very eye-opening project for a lot of people who had no idea that people were going through all of that. A lot of people are like, but I'm like, a lot of Muslim women are like, but I have never been abused or I have never been treated like that. And I'm like, your reality is not everybody else's reality. And only because you are liberal does not mean, or you're progressive does not mean that Islam supports that, right?
Right.
And I saw the gap and I decided to open Faithless Hijabi just for women to be more open even behind a curtain and talk about it. So please follow me on Instagram or Facebook, or both, everything.
Okay, so the next one is we're moving past Quran. I know a lot of people wanted me to bring some other Quranic verses. There are other Quranic verses there that are horrific. And let me actually just give you the numbers if you're going to go check it up. So I mentioned this one. Let me see. Also, because we don't have time. So check out Quran 443 and the commentary on it. I'm not going to get into that here. There was the one that that mentioned you have your wives are as tilf unto you. Okay, this your wives are as the tilf unto you. So approach your tilf when or how you will. So that's Quran 2, Surah 2, verse 223. But I want to get to Muhammad stuff. So when it comes to stuff outside of the Quran, we're talking about the Hadith mostly, and just to understand that for Sunnis, which is most Muslims, the most authentic sources of Hadith, which basically has absolute authority over what the practice, how you're supposed to practice and follow Islam, are as Sahih. The two main sources are Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, and they consider these books 100% authentic. And to people that say, well, this is not the Quran, just remember that 4 of the 5 pillars of Islam comes from the Hadith, not from the Quran, and most laws and teachings of Islam come from the Hadith, not the Quran. And for Shias, is Coffee. The book is called Coffee. I don't have the examples there, but I know Ali, which is the first Imam of Shias, has said some very misogynistic stuff. But because most Muslims are Sunni, I'm going to focus on the Sahih Bukhari here. A lot of people tell me like, "Oh, Armin, you're ex-Shia. Why are you talking about Sunni sources of Hadith?" Which is such bullshit.
I'm just going to clarify that you're an ex-Shia, not
Ex-Shia.
the real Muslim.
Yeah, Because that's such bullshit. Because I also criticize Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, and every other bullshit. I don't have to be an ex those things for me to be able to criticize nonsense. If I told you that I believe in vampires and you tell me, well, that's fucking bullshit, I tell you, my response, well, are you an ex-believer in vampires? If not, then you have no right to criticize me. That's nonsense. All right, so let me read this. Let me see. This is Sahih Bukhari. 1:6:301. All right, let's see. All right, so this is Allah's apostle, which is Muhammad. He was okay. So I'll start here. He passed by the woman and said, and this is Muhammad. Okay, Muhammad saying, "Oh woman, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of dwellers of hellfire were you women." All right, so Muhammad says that he's seen that most people in hell are women. They ask, "Why is it so, O Allah's apostle?" Is that all right? He replied, "You curse frequently and are ungrateful to your husbands. I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man could be led astray by some of you." The woman asked, "O Allah's apostle, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion?" He said, this is bad. He said, "Is not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man?" They replied in affirmative. So basically he's referring to the Quran verse and basically the rule. He said, "This is the deficiency in her intelligence. Isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her, I think this is menses?
During her period?
Menses? Yeah, during your period. The woman replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency in her religion." Sahih Bukhari.
I'm sorry. God didn't create us perfect, and that we had to bear babies instead of men, and we had to get periods, and we had to have a uterus, and biology and stuff. This is God's fault. Why are we then called to be deficient?
Well, you shouldn't have.
I have all these questions.
You shouldn't
with
have
God.
You shouldn't have ate that apple.
You know what? I'm gonna, when I meet Hawa or Eve, I'm gonna question her. I'm like, what is this? Why was I born this?
No, you should congratulate her for defying God. You should be like, good job at not taking their bullshit. Like I eat whatever the fuck I want. Even
yeah. Jeez. Yeah. Look. It's really strange that a woman having her period equates to her being deficient in intelligence and her faith, regardless of what faith it is. It's just really stupid that exists. It was also Najul Balaga, Sermon 80, I think, where we read out the last one. Ali had read it out about women being deficient in their faith. And everybody's like, but you're taking it out of context and whatnot. And I'm like, what context could there possibly exist for somebody like Ali to talk about things like this? And I think he was referring to Aisha because Aisha was fighting against Ali in that battle.
Right. I like Aisha, actually. I like Aisha after Muhammad died. She was a badass.
Yeah, I heard about that. But like, how old was she when Muhammad died?
18.
She was 18 when Muhammad died. Yeah. Okay.
No, she was badass after that. She started. You know how Muhammad, every time he needed something done, Muhammad was like, "Oh, there's a verse coming. Oh, there's a verse coming," and then a verse so convenient will come down. God would tell people to like respect Muhammad or listen to him or give him the wife because he's attracted to at the most convenient time, a verse would come down and make everything easier for Muhammad, right? So I think Aisha was saying that firsthand, and she knew what was going on. So when Muhammad died, every time she wanted something politically convenient for her, she would be like, "Oh, I remember Muhammad saying this. I remember Muhammad saying that." So that's why she's the second most source of hadith, right?
Yeah.
So that's why, because she constantly produced her own sort of hadith, like she just made stuff up every time she wanted something done. Uh,
So we were taught to never really like Aisha because
no,
she
no,
went
because we're
against
Shia.
Ali.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we're
Oh
Shia.
my!
She
I
went
couldn't.
against Ali.
Actually, that's a very good point, because when I became an ex-Muslim, I couldn't. When I learned about Sunnis, I couldn't believe that they loved Aisha, because we hated Aisha as
I
Shias.
know. And even Umar, like the first time I heard when on Fatima's like when we go to the mosque on Fatima's death day, and they were like, "Oh, curse Umar," and I'm like, "Wait, who is this guy? Like, is this like another Umar that Sunnis don't believe in?" And I went and I told my friends, and I'm like, "Do you know people are cursing your caliphate? Like Shias do that?" And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, don't you guys talk in between? Like, have you not known that? And they're like, no, why are Shias cursing Umar? And I'm like, because he killed her. Um,
Yeah. Wait, who killed
uh,
who?
Umar, like,
Omar killed
you know,
Fatima.
or it was a reason that she died. Like,
Yeah, yeah, by
stormed the door
accident. Yeah,
down.
yeah,
Yeah, but so like that's why we curse them. And I'm like, but why are you cursing somebody now? And the whole and they and some of the curses are like curse this person and his whole family and his entire protege,
yeah.
protege, protege.
By
I
the
don't
way,
know
we
that
have some
word.
ex-Muslims from Saudi Arabia, ex-Muslim women from Saudi Arabia in our live chat, which is amazing, which is awesome.
Oh,
Uh,
hey, Muslim women from Saudi Arabia, full of faithless hijabi, and give me your stories so I can post it up.
yeah, that actually, yeah, do that. That's very good. Um, yeah, so Omar was very aggressive towards women. There was actually, okay. So this is a story that is, I think, you find interesting. So um, apparently, so when there was this woman during Muhammad's lifetime, um, that there was this man that was very attracted to her, and he kept on following her, and he came to Muhammad and telling him, like, what do I do? This guy, like, keeps following me. He's attracted to me. What do I do? And Muhammad, because he's haram to me, right? Because we're not married, so we are forbidden from each other. And Muhammad just said, well, if give him some of your milk, and then you become family, so you could hang out. Yeah, this is actually go look this up.
I'm sorry, I can't stop my facial expressions.
So
What milk?
her breast milk. So
Was she
it,
pregnant?
yeah, probably, or else he wouldn't recommend that, right? So she gives him some of her milk, and now they're family, like, because she's like his son, so he could be around her all he wants, right? So, and actually, the interesting thing is that there was a couple of years ago an imam in Egypt, based on this hadith, mentioned, because women are not supposed to be working in offices, like a lot of Muslims look
Hmm.
down upon this, like in
Yeah,
next to men, right? That's, you can't,
yeah.
So this imam in Egypt suggested that if you want to work, women that are working in office areas along with other men should just breastfeed all the men in the office, so that they could hang out with each other, and there would be no problem, because now they're family, right? This is a serious imam making a fatwa like this. Go look this up, right? In Egypt. And the interesting thing about Omar is that there was a guy so this is after Muhammad's death, right? The second Khalifa.
Yeah.
There was a man during Omar's time that goes home and he wants to have sex with his slave, and his wife doesn't like the fact that he constantly just has sex with his slaves instead of her. And what she does is that she breastfeeds this slave woman, and when the husband shows up, she's like, hey, guess what? You can't have sex with her anymore, because I breastfed her and she's now your daughter, right? Because she knew the story from Muhammad's time, and she thinks she found a loophole. And this guy got really angry, and she went to Omar and said, what do I do? I can't have sex with my slave anymore. And Omar says, no, that's bullshit. That was just for Muhammad's time. That doesn't apply anymore. You go home, you go have sex with your slave, and I command you to also beat your wife for trying to do this to you. So that was Omar. That was how Omar treated women. But yeah, Oh, another thing about Aisha with the whole this breastfeeding milk story is that she took it to a whole other level, right? So when Muhammad died, Muhammad made it so that none of his wives can marry after he dies, because usually when you die, now you're a widow, now you go look for another husband, right? But when Muhammad was alive, there was a man making fun of Muhammad, saying, "I can't wait for him to die for me because there's so many women I could go start marrying." Right? So
Yeah.
Muhammad made the commandment that when I die, my wives cannot marry any man, and that's a very difficult position to put your wives in there at that point, because now they have not a father to protect them or a husband. So
And they didn't have sex toys.
what?
And they didn't have sex toys, no dildos. So there you go.
No,
That's true.
why? Well, mostly okay. Yeah, that too, but mostly the protection part, right? So, okay, yeah, that's important as well. Uh, but Aisha was a badass. So not only when Muhammad died, she didn't need a husband to protect her. She actually became a commander. She raised an army against Ali, as we know, right?
Yeah.
But she had a problem because she was commanding men and she couldn't even hang out with them because they were haram. They were like, she can't, it was forbidden to her to be around men that she's not married to. So you
Yeah.
know what she does? She's not pregnant. She's 18. She can't give milk to these men so she could hang out with them. She gets her sisters to breastfeed the men that she wants to command, because now
Oh.
these men are related to her sisters, so they're also by proxy related to her, so now she could hang out with them and tell them what to do at war. So she gets her sisters to breastfeed the commanders that she wants to hang out with. These are
Wow.
authentic stories. Go look these up, people don't believe
Wow.
it.
Wow. This is crazy. I like how your thing says Armin Navabi debates Zara, where we both agree.
Oh, I said okay, so it says debate. Okay, because I used a template. The last person I was talking to was I was debating to, and
I think
I just
we agree on quite a bit,
no,
but
I
I
wasn't.
think
It's not a debate. I was just use a template, and I just
yeah.
filled the name, so that's why.
Oh, I feel special. Thank you.
I
Thank
don't.
you.
You know how much time I have to prepare for this show? I had to study up and get these notes prepared. Do you think I'm gonna personalize my templates before I come
Yes,
here?
because it's me.
Okay,
Okay.
next.
Wait, now I wanted to divert away from the whole
Oh,
theological aspect and
okay,
go
okay,
into
okay.
what's happening now. So I think that's really important because while we can always argue and debate theology, it's important to see what's happening now, like the increase of normalizing hijab, the burqa ban, and the protests against what Masih al-Najad, yeah, is doing. I really like that. Just all of these little things that build up to the bigger picture of what's happening now all around the world. Um, the feminist movement in Islam, Linda Sarsour. So, do you want to get into that?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
You do that. I'm gonna do some research on something while you're doing that. Go ahead. I'm
Okay,
listening.
cool. Yeah, okay, perfect. So recently, we posted something on Faithless Hijabi where it was comparing what is happening in Iran, where women are protesting against wearing the hijab, and comparing it to the US, when Trump came into power, where people started wearing the American flag as a hijab. And they had no like, and these are people, like these are Muslim women. No, sorry, these are women who are not even Muslims. And the whole point was, why are you normalizing something that is clearly an oppressive tool? Right? Why are we, and when people go like, oh, but women choose to wear it, and I'm like, where does the choice come in when the alternative is hellfire, abuse, and ostracism? Where does the choice come in when you impose it on your children to wear them? And that's what has been around, right? When at the age of 9, you tell them that, this is what you're required to do in order to be a good Muslim woman, or to go to heaven, or not be punished in hell because they're not allowed to see your hair. And a lot of times, people who have not been brought up around wearing hijab or being in that environment where you're forced to wear it, which I would say the West, or you know, non-Muslims, they're always trying to be politically correct and supporting women's choices without actually understanding why hijab actually came into place, which was to protect women from men's lustful eyes.
Right.
Um, and, just going forward with that, I think it's important for people to understand why women choose to wear it. A lot of people are like, it's a form of identity. And I'm like, why is it a form of identity? Is it because you want to say you're a Muslim woman? And do you know why the hijab was made in the first place? I think it's important to question women on their choices for wearing it. Mostly because it's like I'm not trying to discriminate, but mostly because what we're representing and what we're trying to normalize is actually something that's oppressive,
Right.
and that's something that we need to continue educating people. I don't even know what's happening on the Facebook chat. People are just having their own.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion happening between people. So if you guys want us to read something, make sure you tag Zara or myself or Atheist Republic.
Yeah.
But I mean, with regards to the hijab, I
Mhm.
mean, there's different ways of looking at it, right? And none of them are good. But first is the origins, which I think we touched on the origin, but then the intention behind having the hijab, and then why people wear the hijab, right? But the intention is pretty clear. The intention has nothing to do with identity as a Muslim, woman empowerment, fashion, covering your hair because you're in because you're in the sun, or any of that. It's the intention, the purpose of hijab is to desexualize women, and not for protecting women against men. The intention is for men to protect their property from other men. That was the goal and the purpose behind the hijab. Now we can talk about now what women see it as and why they wear it, and there's different answers to that. But that was the intention. The intention, like, this is
Of
mine.
course.
I want to protect my property from other men, and I'm going to make it less sexy. This is about desexualizing women. That's what it is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And basically, so that was the intention. Um, but okay, so different. So now we have women that wear it because they're forced to wear it and they don't want to wear it. We have women that wear it because they they say they want to wear it, but they've been brainwashed to think they want to wear it, or women that choose it as a sign of identity, or people that think that this is as part of a or modesty culture. All of those answers apply to different women, right? But and none of that is okay, obviously. But that doesn't mean they don't have the right to wear it. But a lot of people are like, well, they have the right to wear whatever they want. I'm like, yeah,
And
you also have the right to wear the KKK costume. That doesn't mean it's okay. But go on, sorry.
yeah. I was just gonna say then, what do you think about the Burqa ban?
Well, I mean, if it is about security, then I support it.
Yeah.
If it's actually a legit security concern, then I support it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I have two opinions on it, right? And it's always confusing the more I learn about it. Security all in, no costumes, no mascots. One mascot scared me anyway, so Halloween was a bit dreadful for me. But I think that the Burqa ban, one, should come into place because of security, and two, if we think about it, while I don't like the idea of the government or the state making rules for what women should wear, I think it's kind of helpful to then get women. I don't know if that will create more rebellious women to keep wearing it and just pay the fines. But I think if that's the only way we're getting, I would say, rid of it, or if that's the way we're going to be changing or shaping the country and its laws, it might be a good thing. Um,
I mean,
I
Yeah.
am not supportive of the burqa at all or hijab, but I am a big supporter of women making their own choices. Except it is important, I feel like it is important to understand the bigger picture when it comes to those choices.
Right. I mean, I just don't think religion should get any privilege. Like when people say,
Exactly.
you have to wear a helmet unless you're Sikh, or you can't have face covering unless you're a Muslim. I just think if you have a rule, you can't just be like, well, this is my religion, so I get there needs to be, I get to not
Yeah.
follow the rules. I think that's the bullshit thing that we need to stop.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, so a lot of people don't understand that supporting people's right to do something and at the same time seeing it as wrong are not contradictory, right? I support
Yeah.
the right for people to wear the KKK costume and at the same time think it's fucking stupid for people.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I keep saying this and I'm like, sure, you're allowed to believe what you want to. At the same time, I'm allowed to ridicule it. I'm allowed to find it ridiculous, right?
Right.
Don't expect people to agree to what you believe in. And that's where the scrutiny and that's where the activism comes in. And I'm like, I'm allowed to say what I want to. I can as easy say that you wearing a hijab offends me, just
Right.
the way me talking about me
I mean, if
expressing
it
my
should offend them, it's about them. It's like it's kind of like having people in chains. I mean, people say comparing it to KKK costume is too extreme. I like it's fucking
is
it's
it? It's
not.
the same. It's not.
It's not.
It's not.
It's
It's not. It's like wearing a Nazi symbol, and you're like,
as a Jew.
yeah, yeah, exactly, and you're like, yeah, I was in support of the Nazis.
Right.
It's not. It's still an oppressive tool, and that's what it is.
Here.
And
Yeah. Sorry. Go on.
and a lot of men, like a lot of whenever I put up this discussion about, a lot of the comments that we get on faithless hijabi is I was forced to wear the hijab, and once I tried removing it, um, my mom tried to, like, she threatened to kill me, or my dad abused me and things like that. And these are real stories from real women, right?
Right.
And other people are like, no, but you shouldn't have removed the hijab. Your parents were abusive. They were not Islamic because we're not allowed to hurt people. But a hijab is the best form of clothing a woman can wear. And I'm like, why don't men wear hijab? And they're like, yeah, there is a hijab for men where they need to lower their gaze. And I'm like, no, men can cover their hair too. How about you start wearing a headscarf? Like, why don't men wear hijab? And why
Well,
don't
they say because men are not as tempting as women to men.
tr- not true, but like, and not like, I don't even know what to say to that. That's just
Well,
stupid.
the thing is, it doesn't really because that's what they say. But the true answer is, it doesn't matter when men do to women. It doesn't. It's about. It's about women cannot. Women is seen as property, and you're trying to protect your property. Men are just free agents that get to do what they want. That's the difference. But the example I usually give because a lot of people tell me like, what's the big deal? This is not oppression. It's just a fucking headscarf. Like, really, it's like a hat. How could that be oppression, right? And the example I give to people, and I think people in the live chat must have heard this too many times. So sorry for boring you guys for repeating this, but I have to give this example to people that are new. Is that, imagine if you come to my house and me and you are talking and my wife is also standing next to me and you and she's listening on the conversation, right? And all of a sudden she says something and I tell her, why did you interrupt us? We were having a conversation and you interrupted us. Go sit down in the corner there and just think about what you just did. Just go sit down. Time out for you, right? And then when I do that, you tell me like, what the fuck, Armin? Why are you treating her like that? And I tell you, well, it's not a big deal. She's sitting down. I'm tired myself. I might want to sit down as well. That's not a big
Yeah.
deal. How is that? Is that really abusive for me to ask for her to sit down? Sitting down, it's not hurting her. I didn't beat her or anything. She's sitting down. But obviously that's fucking nonsense. You will know when I get to tell her to go sit down in the corner, you will know what kind of a husband I am. You know the role she has in this family, right? You know her position in this
Yeah.
family when you see I get to do that to her. So when
Yeah.
when you get to tell half of your population that you put this on your head because you need to be modest,
Yeah.
and they have to listen, you know what the position of women is in a society when you get to do that to them. When women in Iran, they're taking off their hijab and putting it on a stick and waving it as protest, they're not just protesting against their hijab. They're protesting against everything anti-woman in an Islamic society. They're protesting against their position in an Islamic society. The hijab is a symbol for all of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's really crazy that people find every other analogy related to it as absurd because it doesn't fit in that idea that they have, right? It's changing Islam's rules to fit you. But the truth is that it is imposed on people. It is imposed on Muslim women to wear hijab.
Right.
A lot of people, like I said, a lot of people who think it's a choice. How is it a choice? How is it actually acceptable for you to not wear it? And
I mean,
how is it acceptable for you to not wear it and have that guilty conscience of you going to hell? Because one of the punishments that I heard for women who show even a strand of hair when they hit puberty is that they will be hung upside down with by their hair. They'll be hung by their hair or something like that.
right.
There's so many really crazy things that I was told as a child to keep wearing hijab. And then there's also one more thing, which is what is the right hijab? A lot of people have now taken it as a fashion tool, and they're like, "Oh my God, this girl wears it so cool. I like the hijab. It's so empowering that you can that you can glamour it all up." And I'm like, "Sure, I'm all supportive for you being creative and a fashionista, but that is not what the hijab was meant to be. It was meant to be it was meant to be unattract. It was meant to make you unattractive, right? It's not meant to capture people's eyes. And that was the plan of it. So you can cover your head and then wear really tight clothes and still say, hey, I'm still wearing a hijab. And that is more acceptable than somebody who doesn't wear it at all.
When you're
Um,
yeah, go on.
Go
Sorry.
on.
No, but in some places you could get arrested for wearing tight clothes as well. I mean, it's either enforced by the government,
Yeah.
or your family or your community. Even in Western free countries, a lot of people that wear the hijab is not because it's not by choice. It's because it's enforced for them by family or the community. But the ones that do wear it by choice, I mean. The thing is that what a fucking shame if you're actually wearing it by choice, because you are endorsing a symbol of your fellow human beings being, so demeaned, so oppressed, so treated like second class citizens. And you're taking that symbol of that kind of oppression and you're wearing that by choice.
Yeah.
What a
I mean,
shame if you're actually wearing that by choice.
I always have a debate with my sisters who are all hijabis, and I'm like, do you even know why it was invented? And they have no idea.
Yeah.
And I keep telling them, and they're like, oh, well, I still choose to wear it. And I'm like, okay, fine. If you still choose to wear it, then you have to respect choices that you have. I think what it does, I think the other thing what hijab empowers you to do is undermine women who don't wear it. Right?
Yeah.
It gives you the right to go like, oh, well, like she's not covered, she's not modest enough. And the word modesty has just been taken to a level where if you're not covering your hair, that means you're not modest. I think it's immodest for people who actually are wearing hijab, because they're, again, like we concluded, that it is a symbol of oppression,
Right.
and that is very immodest, and that's how I see
I
it.
mean, but what do you mean by modest? Because if by modest, people mean like not sexual. I say fuck modesty. Like, look, who cares
Well,
about modesty?
that's what I'm getting at. That
Right.
the definition of modesty has changed over time, where modesty was, where modesty is still associated by Muslims on what women wear, while I think it's more of an inner, it's more of a
psychological feeling or a consciousness thing rather than what people wear.
Right. I mean, the response to that by Muslims is like, oh, so you want women to be sexualized? You want women to be treated like sex objects? I'm like, no, you should want women to be whatever they want when they want. They could be sex objects when they want to, and they should be not sex objects when they stop wanting to be. Like we all have to be able to get to decide that. You're making them sex objects all the time when you put the hijab on them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean. Right. Making kids wear it, and you're like, but why is this 9-year-old kid covering her hair? Like, why? I still don't, like, I don't understand why there's a need for this. And then it makes me realize that, oh, it's because you don't know what that symbol, like what the headscarf means. Because when you're covering this girl up, that people who had never thought about looking at her hair are now wondering, what does her hair look like? Should we objectify it? And that's when we start creating a generation that does not value women based on their other attributes and just on their physical attributes.
Right. Anyways, it's weird that God made women the way he did, and then he said, well, cover that shit up.
Cover that.
Anyways, do you want to add anything else? Everything.
I don't have a lot to add, but I was hoping to get questions. Somebody mentioned, why don't you respect, the other thing I hear is, why don't you respect my fashion choice in a free country? Because your fashion choice is a symbol for oppression, because your fashion choice is a symbol for undermining women, because your fashion choice is not liberating at all. So don't make it to be liberating. Don't start claiming that it is. Don't start claiming that your fashion choice is contributing to this positively.
Right. I mean, we don't have to respect it to defend the right for you to wear it. We defend the right for you to wear it, and we do not respect it, and we're going to constantly remind you and everybody else that would listen what it stands for.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you have the right to wear what you want to. You have the right to believe what you want to, and I have the right to ridicule it.
Right.
And I'm not going to ridicule you, but I am going to ridicule the whole concept of it. And if it offends you, then it offends me that you're getting offended over my freedom of speech.
Right. Yeah, I mean, freedom of speech goes both ways. You get to wear what you want to wear, and we get to tell people what it stands for.
Yeah. Do we have any last questions from the audience and the viewers?
And there's comments more than questions. So.
Yeah, I think it's because case in point, not a lot of Muslim women are going to watch it and question this right now, but it will come on later. And because we're not wrong.
Did you see the cover I chose? It's very Muslim friendly. It's very strategic for people to actually click on it. Muslim people.
I like it. I like how you didn't put any. I love the idea, the thought that went into it. Just going to remind you guys, if you haven't followed Faithless Hijabi yet, follow it, and please post it on Atheist Republic.
I will. And can you send me the links and everything on Facebook for me to include it in the description? I'll put it right at the top. Muska has a question. Zara, is the burqa where all you see is the person's eyes? If so, how freaky?
Yeah. That is considered to be the burqa or the niqab.
Yes.
Christy, people have different definitions of it.
Right. Christy is saying you rock. Girl power. Girl power.
Your paper then, or scissors.
Christy is great. Muskal is saying not in the Middle East. Oh, I think she's referring to stoning.
Yes. In the Middle Eastern countries, are there any restrictions on what Muslim men can wear? I think in Iran, you can't wear your shorts above your knees. Above your knees. Yeah, it has to be knee length or longer.
Right, and in Saudi Arabia, I know like sometimes men go to like hot sauna and they wear like full clothes there, even though they're sweating in their clothes, so it's weird. Um, but yeah, I mean,
I wish
also
we could
no,
marry.
also
Sorry, go on.
if you have your shirts like buttons open, showing off your chest in Iran,
Yeah,
you could get the police telling you to button up as a man
yeah.
too as well. Yeah. So
Oh, there was one thing. How many women can a man marry? Sorry, how many men can a woman marry? One.
one, and actually,
One.
that's a good point because before Islam, they could have married multiple in some parts of
Really?
yeah.
But
So
I know some parts of India, tradition, like in some of the tribes, and maybe it's India or Nepal, polyamory is acceptable because it's cheaper,
right.
but it's only between brothers. Like only you have to like one girl can marry a few, but like the brothers.
Right. And so that's another thing that went backwards, right? So women were allowed to marry multiple men as well before Islam, and that right was taken away from them. The excuse people get what they say, what Muslims say defend when men can marry multiple wives and women can't. They say, well, before Islam, men could have married more than four wives, and what Muhammad did was he put a limit to that. So they say that's progress as well. That's what they say. All right, I think that's about it.
I think we've done it for like how long now?
About 2 hours now. All right.
Yeah, it's about midnight for you. Go sleep.
Okay. For people in the live chat, for I think for Christy, for Beach, it's 2 a.m. or something. I don't know what for Beach for everybody.
3 a.m. He just said it was 3 a.m. and I'm like, what are you doing awake? I know I'm amazing, but really, sleep is important.
Yeah. But
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
All right.
I'm still amazing.
Yeah, you are.
How did you want me to counter that? I'm sending you links of Faithless Hijabi and my Facebook page, so you can. I'll
2
send it to you.
a.m. Okay, Facebook people are saying 2 a.m. 2 a.m. Bobby is saying 3 a.m. Oh yeah, Christy 3 a.m. Sorry guys, I did 3 live.
It was.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was worth it.
Yeah, it was worth
I promise you, I'm fun, and maybe we'll come up with different topics. If you have anything you'd like Armin and I to discuss in specific, we can always do that.
Beja's saying so for Beja's 3 a.m. I think 2 a.m. But she said she stayed. Yeah, 3 a.m. But she stayed awake for us. Aw.
Oh, that's
Christy
so
as well. Casey,
oh
Atheist. You guys are make me okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you guys. That's very sweet.
I hope you're having some alcohol with this.
keep it haram. So Jihad, Jeff 2 a.m. Jihad 2 a.m. Tim 7 a.m. Bobby midnight.
8 p.m.
Okay.
It's 6 p.m. for me in Australia, and it's Sunday, so I'm in the future, guys. Sunday exists.
All right. Bija saying it was worth it. Yeah, great. Christy saying great show. Thank you guys. All right, I'm gonna stop streaming. So you stay. I'm just gonna stop streaming for a second. Thank you guys. Thank you everybody in the live chat. Kumar, Muscal, Christy, everybody on Facebook, Wael, and everybody, Bobby, Jeff, Tim. You guys are amazing. Thank you, and good night or good morning.